Once upon a time, there was a man named Jack who lived in a small town. One night, Jack went to bed as usual, but he had a strange dream where he woke up in an empty world. He searched the entire town but found no one, not even a single animal. It was as if the world had been wiped clean of all life, except for him. When Jack woke up from his dream, he was relieved that it was only a nightmare. However, as he got up from his bed, he noticed that the world outside his window was eerily silent. He opened the door to his house and stepped outside, only to find that his neighborhood was completely empty. There were no cars on the street, no lights on in the houses, and no sound except for the rustling of the wind. Jack searched the entire town, but found no signs of life. The more he searched, the more frightened he became. It was as if he was the only person left on the entire planet. As the night began to set in, Jack started to hear strange noises in the distance. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but the sounds grew louder and more distinct. It sounded like the scraping of metal against concrete and the moaning of distant voices. Jack's heart raced as he realized that he was not alone. There was something out there, something that he could not see. He tried to run back to his house, but the streets were now filled with shadows, and he could not see where he was going. The scraping sounds grew louder, and the moans turned into shrieks. In the darkness, Jack could see eyes glowing in the distance, moving towards him. He ran faster and faster, his heart pounding in his chest. The eyes got closer and closer, and Jack could hear the sound of breathing, heavy and raspy. Just as Jack thought he was going to be caught, he woke up, safe in his bed, with the sun shining outside his window. He breathed a sigh of relief, realizing it was all just a dream. However, as he got out of bed, he noticed something strange. The world outside his window was still silent. There were no sounds of traffic or people going about their day. He opened the door to his house and stepped outside, only to find that his neighborhood was still completely empty. Jack realized with horror that his nightmare was not a dream. He was the only person left in the world. And as he stood there, a sense of overwhelming loneliness washed over him. He was truly alone, in a world filled with nothing but silence and darkness. Jack's heart sank as he realized the full extent of his situation. He had always craved solitude and isolation, but this was something entirely different. He was completely cut off from the rest of humanity, with no way of communicating or interacting with anyone else. As the reality of his situation sank in, Jack began to feel a creeping sense of despair. He tried to shake it off, telling himself that he could find a way to survive, but the emptiness of his surroundings seemed to seep into his very being. He had no idea how long he could go on like this, alone in a world that had been stripped of all life. Days turned into weeks, and Jack found himself falling into a routine. He scavenged for food and water, holed up in his house at night, and tried to stay busy during the day to stave off the crushing loneliness. But no matter what he did, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, just out of sight. One day, while he was out scavenging for supplies, Jack saw something move in the distance. It was small, and he couldn't make out what it was, but it was definitely there. He cautiously approached, his heart racing with anticipation and fear. As he got closer, Jack realized that it was a cat, skittering along the pavement. He felt a wave of relief flood over him. At least he wasn't completely alone in the world. He scooped up the cat, feeling a sudden sense of connection with another living creature. He carried the cat back to his house and made it his companion. Days turned into weeks, and Jack and the cat settled into a routine. They would spend their days exploring the empty town, playing games and talking to each other. Jack felt like he had finally found a way to cope with his loneliness. But as time went on, Jack began to notice something strange about the cat. It seemed to know things that it shouldn't, almost as if it was communicating with something outside of their isolated world. And sometimes, when they were out exploring, Jack could feel a sense of dread creeping over him, as if they were being watched by something malevolent. One night, as he lay in bed with the cat curled up beside him, Jack heard a strange noise outside. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming closer and closer. He tensed up, feeling a sudden surge of fear. Was it possible that he wasn't really alone after all? Jack grabbed a flashlight and cautiously made his way to the door. He opened it slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. And then he saw them, a group of figures, shrouded in darkness, moving towards him with purpose. As they got closer, Jack could see that they were not human. They were something else entirely, something that he couldn't quite comprehend. And they were not friendly. With a sense of growing horror, Jack realized that he and the cat were not the only ones left in the world. There were others out there, something that he couldn't even begin to understand, and they were coming for him. Jack tried to run, but it was too late. The figures closed in around him, and he was swallowed up by darkness. As he was dragged away, he felt a sense of bitter resignation. He had thought that he could survive on his own, but in the end, he was just another victim of the uncaring, empty world that he had been left behind in.